Bobby Valentine here on the Rich Eisen Show. Bobby, thanks for calling in. I appreciate it.
Hey, Rich Eisen, my pleasure, man.
It's been a while.
Pleasure. You always do great radio. I hope I don't mess it up.
Oh, Bobby, don't be that way. It's been a long time since we chatted in the ESPN newsroom. I'm thrilled to have you on here, certainly with a big story going on in New York. Have you ever seen anything like this, Bobby, in your experience?
Well, it was interesting, that's for sure. I was having dinner, as a matter of fact, with Tommy Lasorda and Dusty Baker, as I got a little, twit cast that says, hey, these guys are just traded. And I'm like, can you imagine that? We got the Mets now have Gomez in center field. I turned off my phone, and 2 hours later I went home and watched TV and found out that it wasn't true. So it is an amazing world we're living in.
So what do you think Terry Collins was thinking? Was he livid? Was he angry with the circumstances? What position does that put a manager in, Bobby?
Well, things do happen where the manager can't be notified, and I understand that totally. I was in Texas, before the internet age, back in the 80s, and Tom Grieve is a very good friend of mine. We talked about everything. Steve Buechele, who's now the bench coach with the Texas Rangers, was a very good friend and third baseman on my team. He had lunch with me this June 15th afternoon and said, hey, listen, am I going to be traded or not? And I said, I just came from the general manager's office. The guys that we wanted to get from Pittsburgh, they're not giving up. He told me the deal's off. You're with us. Don't worry about a thing. And then in the fifth inning of the game, he came off the field after the inning ended, and I said, Boo, you're out of the game and you're off to Pittsburgh. So I wasn't told that was going to happen. I was told it was not going to happen, but things change. And you have to really understand stuff like that. I was up in Boston when I saw it scroll across the bottom of the TV pre-game, like 5 minutes before the game, that Gonzalez and Beckett and Crawford and Punto were traded to L.A. And when I went out to the dugout, Adrian Gonzalez said, take me out of the lineup. I was traded to L.A. I said, what are you, crazy? Go out there and have a good time. I read that, too. It's just a rumor. Well, before the national anthem was over, I was told that the trade was done and to take him out of the lineup. So, you could be angry, I guess, but I think you have to understand that you just can't be part and parcel of every lineup, every hit and run play, every pitching change, and every trade that's made.
Bobby Valentine, former Mets manager, joining me here on the Rich Eisen Show. So that said, what conversation do you think Terry Collins had with Sandy Alderson when it was all said and done, Bobby?
Well, he probably found out what happened, and it was probably uncontrollable circumstance, that why the plug was, unplugged is probably regretful. It was probably as close to it making a trade as could be made, and I'd be betting, even though I'm not a betting guy, that it was the agent who was informed by somebody in the general manager's office, some general manager's office, and some agent. There are a few people involved here who decided to tell someone, who decided to put it out, who then, let the wildfire go because, this information age is faster than a thought.
Bobby Valentine joining me here on the show. If it comes down to money, and Terry Collins, if you're a manager of a team that doesn't want to spend, what do you do about that as a manager? If it comes down to something like that, Bobby?
Well, it's like being a manager of a restaurant. You want to put in a brick oven pizza oven, and the owner says, hey, I can't afford to do it. What are you going to do? Not come to work the next day? You're going to stop selling the hamburgers and the salad that you already have on the menu? No, you have to go about your business and do the best job you can and hope that eventually the pizza oven gets put in or that the additions to the team come.
So what happens now for Collins if Flores stays? I mean, he's out of the game today. Tomorrow's the deadline. Yeah. How do you put the pieces back together again?
Well, I don't think it'll ever be exactly the way it was. The thing you want to establish in an organization and on a team is trust. And you have to work your butt off to gain the trust of the players. And when that trust factor is broken, it hardly ever is put back together as good as it was prior, but it could be, it could be mended, and you could go forward.
And what about the circumstances of the city itself, New York, Bobby? Just your experiences of what you've done and where you've been and where you've managed. The fact that something like this takes place in New York City, what does that mean for the cauldron in which it takes place, Bobby?
Well, actually, to believe it or not, it's good. It's good for baseball in the city. It's good for the Mets. It's maybe not as good for the two players involved, one who's on the disabled list, but we're talking about it, Rich. That's a good thing. The fans are talking about it. When I was in CBS this morning, a guy came up to me and said, "What do you think about it?" So, when they have apathy and they don't care what's happening and they're not talking about it, then you have a problem. But when you have people talking about it, whether it's good or bad, I think it's a good thing.
If there's a couple of moments from your Mets career I'd love to hit you up on, Bobby, while I have you on the phone. We've never really spoken about it. What was your perspective when Clemens threw the bat at Piazza in the World Series, Bobby? What were you thinking when that happened?
Oh, I thought it was a real spontaneous, regretful action. Leading up to that, remember, this was New York against New York. There was a lot of tension mounting, and there were a lot of talks before the game, many of them by the commissioner's office, about how they want everyone to behave and how the spotlight of baseball is now cast upon New York and how we're supposed to represent baseball in the true fashion. And all of a sudden, the broken bat goes at Mike. And initially, Mike was just dumbfounded and just said, "What a stupid thing to do." But then when you started realizing it was Roger Clemens who hit Mike Piazza in the head with a fastball, and I think he did it deliberately because Mike was wearing him out, is now the guy throwing the bat, and it's the great Mike Piazza who is skipping over it. It becomes much bigger and much crazier than the actual act.
Do you think Piazza's a Hall of Famer, Bobby?
Yeah, I think he will be a Hall of Famer soon. He's as good a hitting catcher as ever lived, and he was a good defensive catcher also. Just didn't throw very well, but he blocked the ball and caught the ball as well as any of his peers.
And what about that night when baseball resumed after 9/11, Bobby? Walk me through that night from your recollection.
Wow, it's a real hard one for me, Rich, because I was tired. I was like everybody else who was involved, in the New York area. We were dealing with fear. We were dealing with family. We were dealing with funerals and tears and the unknown, because we had no way of reaching back and figuring out what to do from history. So I think the confusion of that night, and remember, Atlanta wasn't a willing participant until right at the end. They were thinking, why would we go to New York, a place that's only a couple miles from LaGuardia, where a plane had taken off that went into the Trade Center without this thing being settled? Why don't they just come down here and play? And there were some people who were steadfast in the belief that, the recovery process was going to begin if, in fact, we took a big step forward, went out on the field and played a baseball game. And I'm glad that Bobby Cox and the entire Braves organization and Major League Baseball made a great decision to play that game in New York. It was emotional. It was confusing, as I said, because there was no excitement in the game until that ball was hit by Mike Piazza. There were people just spectating, wondering what might happen next, and not necessarily whether or not the action was going to be out on the field. And all of a sudden, that home run got everyone's attention onto the field, and it will live on forever as one of the great days of my life.
No doubt. And then on the other end of the spectrum of your stay with the Mets, where'd you get that disguise that you came back into the dugout with after you got ejected,
Yeah,
Bobby?
The team needed some levity, Rich. It was nothing more than the black that you put underneath your eyes,
Okay.
The little stickers that you peel off, a pair of sunglasses that Robin Ventura threw over to me, and a hat that Oral Hershiser threw over to me. I wanted to go out and see if I could break the tenseness of the team who had just blown a couple-run lead, and we were now in extra innings, and see if someone would smile. A lot of guys smiled, and lo and behold, we won that game
There you go.
and went on to the playoffs. So that was a fun thing.
Okay.
Except for the fine that I had to pay and the suspension that I had to serve. That was a fun thing.
Is there any chance, I know where you are in Sacred Heart there in Fairfield, you're a Connecticut guy, and you're enjoying it, but is there any chance you get back in baseball, Bobby?
Well, I talked to some teams, and I'd say there's an outside chance, but I live my life, Rich. You've met me before. I get up in the morning, do the best I can at whatever I'm doing, and I've been a lucky guy so far, and I count my blessings every day.
And last question for fans who are saying same old Mets based on what we saw last night. What do you say to the Met fan base based on what went down with the Flores trade? Bobby?
Well, I guess we have to say that it happens, and sometimes you put an SH before the it and just decide that this is a special season. That's a special team out there, and the more attention they get, I think the better it is, because I think they're going to be in the playoffs, and look out when they are.
Bobby, thanks for calling in. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks, Rich.
Been great chatting with you.
The Rich Eisen Show, weekdays at noon Eastern. On Audience.